Imagine pulling up to your dad's old land, only to find a multi-million-dollar HOA built on top of it, and the woman at the gate calls you a criminal. That happened to Ethan Cole. And when he found his dead father's forged signature on the deed, the courtroom exploded. My name's Ethan Cole, 45 years old, high school shop teacher, born and raised in Cedar Ridge, Texas. Population 6,000, one stoplight, 2 BBQ joints, and a gossip chain faster than the internet. I've lived in the same brick house since 2004, drive a 2011 Ford F-150 with a cracked windshield, and own exactly one thing that ever made me feel rich: 22 acres of lakeside land just outside Austin. My dad, Richard Cole, bought it back in 1979 when land around Lake Travis was dirt cheap. He worked 35 years for the phone company, saved every paycheck, and paid cash for that slice of shoreline. He used to say, "They're not making land anymore, son. Hang on to it." When he passed in 2017, he left me everything: the deed, a tin box full of tax receipts, and a handwritten note that said, "Keep it wild." I didn't sell, didn't build, just paid the taxes every April, $3,200 on the dot, and told myself that someday I'd turn it into a place to breathe once the noise of life quieted down. By May 2023, that someday finally came. School was out, my divorce paperwork was finalized, and for the first time in years, I had 2 straight weeks with no students, no obligations, and no one waiting at home to tell me I worked too much. I packed my truck like I was going camping for a month. Cooler, chainsaw, sleeping bag, a stack of lumber sketches, and hit Highway 71 heading west toward the lake. The drive from Cedar Ridge to Lake Travis takes 40 minutes if you ignore the speed limits and the deer. The road curls between cedar hills that smell like sun-baked resin, and by the time I reached the old fire road that led to my property, I could already smell the water. I slowed down, gravel crunching under the tires. The last time I'd been here was in 2020, the year everything shut down. The path had been a simple dirt trail marked by a rusted mailbox with my dad's faded handwriting, "Cole Property, Private." But that morning, the mailbox was gone. Instead, there was a fresh asphalt road lined with brick columns and perfectly trimmed hedges. And right in front of me, a massive wrought iron gate. Polished black metal, with a stone arch above it that read in engraved bronze letters, "Welcome to Lakeview Estates, a Whitfield HOA Community." I killed the engine and just stared. Behind the gate, a brand new world shimmered in the Texas sun. Concrete driveways, sprinklers watering imported sod, luxury homes stretched down the hill to the lake. 2-story Mediterranean-style houses with fake clay roofs, boat docks, and golf carts buzzing between them. It looked like an ad for a gated paradise, except it was sitting right on my father's land. For a second, I actually thought I'd taken the wrong turn. I pulled out my phone, opened the GPS app, and checked the coordinates. Same numbers printed on Dad's old survey map: 30.413 N, 97.923 W. This was it, my land. My chest tightened. Where my dad's barbed wire fence used to stand, there was now a stone retaining wall with decorative lanterns. Where our old pecan tree had been, there was a guardhouse, a small, air-conditioned cube with tinted windows and a red and white barrier arm. And on the side of that little building, a gold logo, Whitfield Development Group. I eased the truck forward until the front bumper kissed the gate sensor. A green light blinked, then turned red. A small speaker beside it crackled to life. "Lakeview Security, how can I help you?" The voice was smooth, practiced, polite, and about as genuine as a telemarketer's smile. I leaned out my window. "Yeah, my name's Ethan Cole. I own this property. I'm trying to get through." Static hummed. Then came the reply, syrupy, south and sweet. Sir, this is private property. If you're not a resident or invited guest, I'll need you to turn around before security's called. I blinked. Ma'am, this is my property. My dad bought this land in 1979. I have the deed at home. Silence. Then a chuckle, the kind meant to make you feel small. Well, bless your heart, Mr. Cole, but this land was acquired by Lakeview Estates 2 years ago. You might want to check your records. Before I could respond, the red light flashed brighter and the barrier lowered tighter against the gate. The conversation was over. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder and stepped out. Heat rippled off the pavement. I could hear hammering in the distance, construction crews finishing yet another house on my shoreline. I walked up to the gate and gripped the bars. Cold metal. Solid. A white SUV rolled up from inside. The tinted window lowered, and out leaned the same woman whose voice I'd just heard. Martha Whitfield. Mid-50s, blonde bob, diamond earrings big enough to catch sunlight like mirrors. She had the kind of face money buys after 40. She gave me a quick up-and-down glance, dusty jeans, birdie boots, sweat-stained baseball cap. Then she smiled, thin and patronizing. Problem, sweetheart? Yeah, I said. You built a neighborhood on my land. She laughed softly. Your land? Oh, honey, that's adorable. This development was approved by Travis County in 2021. Fully permitted. We bought it fair and square from the owner on record, Richard Cole. The name hit like a slap. My father's been dead 6 years. Her smile froze for a second, then she recovered, adjusting her sunglasses. Well, then you'll need to take that up with the county. Now, if you'll excuse me. She motioned to the guard, who stepped out of the booth, hand resting on his belt as if I expected him to attack. I held up my phone, snapped a photo of the gate sign, the guardhouse, and Martha Whitfield herself. She frowned. Lady, your bylaws don't mean squat on my land. Her tone sharpened. That attitude will get you in trouble. Trespassing's a felony in Texas. That word, felony, echoed. A woman standing on my father's soil had just threatened to arrest me for being there. The last time I'd been here with Dad was the summer of 2014. We'd set up folding chairs by the water, grilled cheap burgers, and argued about whether he should finally sell. Developers had already started circling back then, sending letters, making calls. Don't trust them, he told me. They'll promise you heaven and sell you concrete. This land stays ours. I remember him patting that old oak beside us. This tree's older than both of us put together. Let's see some HOA try to cut her down. Standing there 9 years later, I looked toward that same hill and saw nothing but a model home with a red and white sold banner fluttering where the oak tree used to stand. Something broke inside me. I got back in my truck, hands shaking, and drove straight to town. Stopped at the first gas station with Wi-Fi and started digging. Travis County's online land record system is slow, clunky, but public. I typed in the parcel ID printed on Dad's deed, number 00473-219A. It popped up immediately, except the owner line didn't say Ethan Cole. It said Lakeview LLC. Date of transfer, June 14th, 2021. 2 years after my father died. I scrolled further and found the scanned deed. The signature read Richard Cole. Perfect cursive, notarized, witnessed, filed. Except Dad's hands had been too shaky to write like that in 2017, and by 2021, he'd been buried under the live oaks at Cedar Ridge Cemetery. I sat there in that gas station parking lot, air conditioning humming, staring at the screen until my phone battery hit 10%. They hadn't just built on my land. They'd forged a dead man's signature to steal it. I drove home in silence, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Dad about keeping it wild. His tin box of records sat on the top shelf of my closet. I pulled it down and laid it out on the kitchen table like I was building a case file. 1979 deed. Property tax receipts from 1980 to 2023. Surveyor's maps showing the original boundaries. A copy of his death certificate dated June 14, 2017. Same date as the so-called sale. The coincidence was so blatant, it felt like mockery.
At 2 a.m., I wrote one sentence on a sticky note and stuck it to the lamp. Don't let them bury Dad twice. Because that's what this was, a second burial. Not of a man, but of his legacy. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. In a courtroom, with the Texas property code on my side and every receipt my father ever saved. I didn't know then how ugly it would get, how far Martha Whitfield and her HOA army would go. The forged documents, the Facebook lies, the police complaints, the sleepless nights. But as I folded the deed back into its envelope, I felt something I hadn't in years. Purpose. Dad always said land teaches patience. I was about to teach them consequences. And that's how my quiet life as a shop teacher turned into a headline-making war with the most powerful HOA in Texas. That sweet, patronizing voice at the gate belonged to Martha Whitfield, president of the newly minted Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, wife of real estate developer Greg Whitfield, and the self-appointed queen of every cul-de-sac within a 5-mile radius. She was the kind of woman who treated a Starbucks cup like a scepter, venti, half-calf, oat milk foam, judgment on tap. Her white linen suit looked like it had never known Texas dust, and her perfume hit harder than the June heat. When she finally opened the gate to speak with me personally, she did it with the air of someone indulging a peasant. "Mr. Cole," she said, stepping out of her white Range Rover, "this community was legally acquired through eminent domain back in 2021. You must have missed the notice." Her voice dripped sugar, but her eyes were sharp, two pale chips of ice studying whether I'd bend or break. "Impossible," I said. "You can't just take private property without compensation. Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 17, property can only be taken for public use with adequate compensation. A golf cart subdivision isn't public use." She tilted her head like a bird examining roadkill. "Oh, sweetie, you should really talk to our lawyer. He'll explain everything." Then she did something that told me exactly who I was dealing with. She raised her phone, snapped a picture of my license plate, and smiled without showing teeth. "Don't come back. Trespassing here is a felony." That word hit me in the chest like a hammer. Felony. On my father's land. I drove away on autopilot, the gate shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just a black slash across the sunlight. My hands were trembling on the wheel. When I hit the highway, I pulled over and sat for a while. Trucks roared past, shaking my mirror, but all I could see was Dad's handwriting on that old deed. His name, his signature, his dream. The word felony replayed like an echo inside my skull. Dad had always joked that laws were written to protect landowners. I wondered what he'd think now. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had drained into a dull, steady rage. I walked straight to my office, pulled down the metal filing box labeled Dad, Property, and spread everything across the table like a detective piecing together a murder. First, the original 1979 deed, notarized, recorded with the Travis County clerk, bearing the county seal and the same parcel number I'd memorized by heart. Then, the survey maps, one from 1981 showing the shoreline before the drought, another from 2005 when we'd added a fence line after a neighbor's cattle kept wandering in. Next, the tax receipts, every single one. 43 years of payments, each one marked paid in full. The latest, April 2023, $3,212.76. My bank statement matched it to the cent. No liens, no mortgage, no eminent domain filing. I double-checked the Travis County docket. If eminent domain had been used, there'd be a condemnation case listed under my father's or my name. Nothing. Not one entry. They'd lied. I started Googling. Texas eminent domain private developer. Lakeview Estates Whitfield development. HOA property seizure lawsuit. Within 10 minutes, I found a local news article from 2021. Whitfield Development Group to bring luxury lake living to Travis County. It quoted Greg Whitfield bragging about a partnership with county officials to revitalize underutilized land. Underutilized? That was my dad's forest they were talking about. There was even a photo. Greg Whitfield in a hard hat cutting a ceremonial ribbon with the county commissioner, Charles Denton, a man later fined for taking developer donations above the state limit. I leaned back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was corruption dressed in a designer suit. Around 9 p.m., I called the number printed on the Whitfield Development website. A cheerful receptionist answered. "Good evening, Whitfield." "I need to speak to Greg Whitfield. It's about Lakeview Estates." "May I ask who's calling?" "Ethan Cole. I own that property." There was a pause, the kind where someone covers the receiver to whisper. Then she came back, voice tighter. "Mr. Cole isn't available, but I can have his assistant reach out. What's this regarding?" "Fraud," I said, and hung up. Sleep didn't come. Every creak in the house sounded like the metallic groan of that gate. At 2 a.m., I opened Dad's old ledger. Inside the front cover, he'd scribbled one of his sayings. "Trust, but verify, and keep the paper trail." I smiled in spite of everything, because if there was one thing the Whitfields didn't count on, it was a dead man who documented every blade of grass he owned. Next morning, I drove to the Travis County Clerk's office. The building smelled like paper and disinfectant, that bureaucratic perfume you never forget. A clerk named Harold Griggs, gray-haired and friendly, sat behind the counter. His name tag read, Senior Records Technician. "How can I help you?" he asked. "I need property records for parcel 004-73219A, Richard Cole, Lake Travis area." He typed for a moment, then frowned at his scream. "Well, sir, looks like that parcel transferred in 2021 to Whitfield Lakes, LLC. "Transferred how?" I asked. "Voluntary sale, recorded June 14, 2021, deed of transfer signed by Richard Cole." I felt the blood drain from my face. "My father died in 2017. He looked up slowly. "Then we've got a problem, don't we?" He printed a certified copy for me. The ink was still warm when he handed it over. That signature on that paper was neat, confident, almost elegant. Nothing like Dad's shaky scrawl from his last years. And there it was, stamped and notarized by someone named Darlene Carter, commission expiring 2024. I looked her up. She worked for Whitfield Development Group. My stomach turned. Forgery wasn't just unethical, it was a felony under Texas Penal Code 32.21. If I could prove the deed was forged, everything built on that land was illegal. Every house, every sale, every mortgage. But that also meant the people living there, the families buying those homes, were unknowing victims too. Martha's HOA empire was sitting on a time bomb. At noon, while I was still parked outside the courthouse, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Mr. Cole, this is Alan Dorsey, counsel for Lakeview Estates. I understand you've been contacting our clients and making claims of ownership." "I haven't contacted anyone except your client who stole my land." He sighed, the kind practiced exhale lawyers use to sound patient. "Mr. Cole, my clients acted in good faith under duly recorded documentation. If you continue trespassing or defaming them, we'll have no choice but to seek an injunction." "Go ahead," I said. "Then you'll have to show that forged deed in front of a judge." There was a pause. "I suggest you think carefully about your next steps." Then he hung up. The line went dead, but the threat lingered. That evening, I sat with my laptop and started mapping connections. Whitfield Lakes LLC was registered in Delaware, like most shell companies. Its listed agent was Greg Whitfield, but the financing came from a Houston bank, Lone Star Trust, where Commissioner Denton's brother happened to be Vice President of Development Loans. A neat little circle of corruption. I called a friend, Tom Henderson, who worked construction and had heard rumors about the Whitfields. He laughed bitterly when I mentioned Lakeview. "Man, they've pulled that stunt before. Out near Bostrop, old rancher died, paperwork vanished. Next thing you know, there's a subdivision. They settle out of court every time. How do they keep getting away with it? He banks on folks not having proof. You, though, you've got receipts, then you're their worst nightmare." By midnight, I'd made 2 calls. One to the Travis County District Attorney's Office, leaving a message for the Property Crimes Division, and one to a lawyer my buddy Tom recommended, Allison Reyes, a bulldog of a litigator known for tearing apart crooked developers. Her voicemail greeting was brisk. "If this is about a land dispute, leave your parcel number and call."
I nearly dropped the phone. "There was no sale," I snapped. "Document shows your father signed a deed of transfer in June of 2021, he said. "Careful now. The paper is filed here. You can come by and get a certified copy." My fingers went numb. The floor felt like it was slipping out from under me. June 2021? That was 4 years after my dad died. June 14, 2017, his death certificate read. Same date, but 4 years apart. A cruel echo. The truth landed with the physical thud of a judge's gavel. They'd forged his signature. I drove to the courthouse like a man on a mission. The morning felt colder than it should have, the light thin and suspicious. The Travis County Recorder's office smells like dust and old coffee. Behind the glass, Harold, the same clerk who'd been polite on the phone, stamped a certified copy of the deed and slid it through. There it was, a neat, practice signature in ink, a notary stamp, the recorded page number. Richard Cole, June 14, 2021. Not a single smudge, not the hesitant loops my father's hand used in his last year. Whoever had penned this had taken the time to make it look beautiful. I didn't know then what the right move was, but I knew what the wrong one would be. Sit on it, breathe, let them build more houses, let more families move in thinking everything was legitimate. Or act fast. That night, I called Allison Reyes. She answered on the second ring. Her greeting was straightforward, no small talk. "Mr. Cole, I read your voicemail. Bring everything to my office tomorrow morning at 10. At 10, Allison's office smelled of lemon cleaner and legal pads. She was a woman built for litigation. Sharp bob, sharper mind. Once an assistant district attorney, she'd made a career out of hunting developers who thought the law was negotiable. When I handed her the certified copy, she didn't blink. She slid the deed under a light and looked at the notary stamp like a detective examining a clue. She said, "This isn't a civil property dispute. This is criminal forgery and a fraudulent conveyance. Texas Penal Code Section 32.21 covers forgery. And if we can show this deed was fabricated to transfer title, we have a criminal case and a civil path to claw the land back. We're going to burn them." She said it like a plan. Not bravado, the cool, measured voice of someone who's won fights like this before. Allison outlined the first volley in the war she intended to wage. 2 simultaneous tracks.
emergency injunctive relief in civil court to freeze all transfers and sales inside Lakeview Estates, and a criminal referral to the Travis County District Attorney's Office asking for an investigation into forgery, fraud, and possibly conspiracy. We filed a temporary restraining order, she told me, sliding a neatly annotated statute across the desk. In Texas, Rule 680, it's emergency injunctive relief. If the judge signs, we freeze the deeds, the sales, everything. Nobody can transfer title or take any money while the court sorts this out. While that's happening, we subpoena the notary, the county records, and the Whitfield's title company. We get the bank records. We get the metadata from their emails. If they forged your father's signature, they left a breadcrumb somewhere. Breadcrumbs. The word sounded small and hopeful. Allison lit a cigarette of legalese and diplomacy that smelled like victory. Subpoenas, handwriting analysts, bank subpoenas that could make a rich man sweat. We filed the TRO that afternoon. Allison's paralegal worked like a machine. Affidavits from me about continuous ownership, proof of tax payments, like April, like clockwork, copies of Dad's death certificate, the ledger of receipts, survey maps, photos with timestamps showing the property unchanged from 2019 to 2022. Allison attached an affidavit explaining why immediate injunctive relief was necessary. If Whitfield continued selling lots, if mortgage money flowed to their bank accounts, the legal landscape would be contaminated with third-party good faith purchasers, complicating recovery. We filed the complaint at the courthouse. The filing fee felt like an admission price for going to war. The judge assigned was Judge Reynolds, known in Travis County for moving cases fast when fraud was alleged. She took fraud seriously. Her calendar wasn't for cowards. Within 48 hours, our request for a temporary restraining order was in the hands of the court. Allison asked for an ex parte hearing, a short hearing where the defendants are not present because time was the enemy. If Whitfield closed another sale that week, that would complicate everything. But Whitfield didn't sit idle. They countered with lawyers who smelled of money and county favors. Their counsel, Alan Dorsey, filed an emergency motion of his own arguing that Lakeview Estates had acquired the property legitimately and that Ethan's claims were harassing and frivolous. He sent us a polite, thinly veiled threat: "Stop contacting our residents or we'll seek an injunction against you for harassment." Then the real ugliness began. First came the social media campaign. A glossy press release circulated online. Lakeview Estates, a model of progress. Recent speculations about property ownership are baseless and defamatory. The Whitfield PR machine posted pictures of smiling families on docks, Thanksgiving tables, neighborly barbecues, the kind of imagery that makes people defensive and scared. A Facebook group called Neighbors for Lakeview sprouted overnight, populated with sock accounts and 2 or 3 real residents who were fed talking points. The comments filled with venom. "We paid for our homes, leave us alone!" The smear was surgical. It aimed at the one soft spot ordinary people have: fear for their families. Within a week, my life outside court unraveled. A notice from my principal asking if I needed personal leave arrived in my inbox. A neighbor avoided my eye at the grocery store. Someone anonymously complained to code enforcement that I was illegally dumping on the property, which was ridiculous, but it bought them time and public suspicion. Allison warned me not to respond on social media. She said, "Let them dig their own grave. We'll use their evidence." Allison pushed forward with subpoenas. She wanted the original email servers, the notary's appointment book, payment records for deposits on the lots, and crucially, the metadata for the deed file. That metadata, the invisible crumbs attached to every digital file, could show who authored the deed, when it was scanned, from which IP address, and crucially, whether the file was created after Dad's death but labeled with a backdated timestamp. She also subpoenaed the title company the Whitfields had used, Rock Ridge Title Services, and asked for communications between Rock Ridge and Whitfield Development. On a Wednesday in late September, A process server walked onto my property to serve the Whitfield's counsel with the TRO hearing notice. He took a photo, and somehow that photo made its way into the Neighbors for Lakeview group. The mob dynamics kicked in. Someone posted my truck's license plate. Someone else posted an old high school yearbook photo of me. The story went small-town viral. Local man claims Lakeshore, harasses families. I started getting text messages from numbers I didn't know. "Leave the kids alone," one read. Someone claimed they saw me prowling at dusk. Another called my workplace. All this was the predictable pushback Allison had warned me about. You don't just threaten a developer who's eaten entire towns for breakfast without getting spit back. But even as the smear spread, Allison's subpoenas were working. 2 days before the hearing, Rock Ridge Titles Council called Allison in a panic. "They've got a problem," they said. "Our internal accounting shows an unscheduled deposit into Whitfield's account in June 2021. There's no corresponding seller instruction in the file. And the notary, Darlene Carter, says she doesn't recall notarizing that deed, but her stamp appears on the scanned document." Allison's voice on the phone was cold and precise. "We're issuing a subpoena for your whole file, and the DA's office will want to see anything that looks like irregularity." The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Lakeview residents filled 2/3 of the gallery, faces shadowed by the idea that their dream could be a fraud. The Whitfields occupied the front row, immaculate, with lawyers who spoke in pleasant, oily tones. Judge Reynolds listened to Allison lay out the facts. The certified deed recorded in June 2021, the death certificate dated June 14, 2017, the bank deposit flagged by Rockridge, the notary's uncertain recollection, and the pattern of predatory purchases Allison started to trace in other counties. Then Allison unloaded something else. A single page of printed metadata from a scanned file Rockridge had reluctantly provided. It showed the deed was scanned on June 16, 2021, from an IP address assigned to Whitfield Development Group in Houston. Even watching from the gallery, you could feel the room change. Murmurs, the soft rustle of suit fabric. Judge Reynolds studied the metadata printout like it was a smoking gun. "There's enough here." But Judge Reynolds didn't laugh. He turned slowly toward the defense table. "Counselor," he said, his voice low, "I hope you enjoy explaining this to the Attorney General's office, because I'm referring it myself." Dorsey's smile twitched. Greg looked like someone had just unplugged his heart monitor. Martha just kept staring at me, a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. That afternoon, the court order hit the county database. All financial accounts, construction activities, and real estate transactions related to Lakeview Estates are hereby suspended pending investigation. The Whitfield's $1 million cash flow? Frozen. I should have celebrated, but I didn't even get 24 hours before they hit back. That night, Martha Whitfield went on Facebook. She posted a photo of the Lakeview sign, the same one I'd stared at that first day, with a caption in clean, bold text. "Community alert. Beware of local man Ethan Cole. Dangerous squatter threatening our families. He's been trespassing, taking photos of children, and making residents feel unsafe. Police have been notified. Stay vigilant." She attached my picture, my driver's license photo. By morning, the post had 1,200 shares. Every gossip group in Travis County had picked it up. The comments section turned into a public trial. "Is this the guy I saw taking pics by the gate? Creepy. Someone should report him to CPS if he's around kids." They didn't just smear me, they erased my humanity. At 7:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my principal, Mr. Hardin. "Ethan, could you come in early today?" When I walked into his office, the look on his face told me everything. He slid his phone across the desk. On the screen was Martha's post. He said, "Parents are calling. They're worried. I know it's nonsense, but the district has to protect its image. Maybe take some personal leave until this clears up." It wasn't a request. By noon, I'd been officially placed on administrative leave, pending legal resolution. 14 years of teaching, gone, with one Facebook post. When I stopped for gas on the way home, 2 men at the next pump stared at me, whispering. When I went to the grocery store, a woman pulled her kid closer. And when I got home, there was a flyer in my mailbox that read, "Keep Lakeview safe. Report suspicious activity." Under it, my photo. I stood in my driveway holding that paper until my hands shook. Allison called that evening. "I saw the post," she said, flatly. "Don't respond, don't comment, don't even like anything. Every reaction gives her more ammunition." "She's calling me a predator," I said, voice cracking. "People think I'm stalking kids. My job. I know. And we'll sue her for defamation per se. In Texas, accusing someone falsely of criminal conduct is automatic defamation. But if you argue online, you'll look defensive. Let her dig." Dig what? Her own grave. 2 days later, a local tabloid picked up the story. "Disgraced teacher claims $1 million community is built on his land." The reporter had clearly gotten their quotes from Martha. She was even pictured, standing in front of the gate, hands clasped, looking concerned. "She's playing the victim," Allison said, watching the clip on her laptop. "That's her strategy. Control the narrative before the facts come out. Classic PR warfare." Meanwhile, the injunction started to bite. Whitfield Development's bank accounts were frozen, leaving contractors unpaid. Trucks sat idle at job sites. Homeowners panicked, realizing they might be living on disputed property. And then came the anonymous tips. Code enforcement showed up at my door one afternoon. A tired officer with a clipboard cleared his throat. "We got a report about hazardous waste being dumped on parcel 00473-219A. Need to inspect." I just stared at him. "It's a gated community. I don't even have access to it." He shrugged. "Yeah, I figured. Happens every time the Whitfields are in trouble. Same pattern." He handed me his card. "If you need a statement later, call me." Another breadcrumb. The following week, I woke up to find "pervert" spray-painted in red across my garage door. I filed a police report. The responding deputy, not unkind but exhausted, took photos. "You make enemies with money, son. They fight dirty," he said before driving off. That night, I sat on my porch with a baseball bat across my knees. My dog, Jasper, lay beside me, growling at shadows. I wasn't scared, not exactly. I was humiliated, cornered, furious. But beneath it all, a new emotion was forming. Focus. They were overplaying their hand. Every smear, every false report, every message was evidence. And Allison was documenting everything. A week later, Allison filed 2 new motions: a defamation lawsuit against Martha personally, a motion to amend the injunction to include no public statements that could prejudice the case. We walked into court again. Same judge, same courtroom, same glare from Martha across the aisle. Allison spoke calmly, but her words hit like gunfire. "Your Honor," she said, "since this court's injunction, the defendants have embarked on a coordinated smear campaign designed to destroy my client's reputation and interfere with the administration of justice. They've called him a stalker, a criminal, a threat, all well knowing they forged a deed. We have screenshots, timestamps, and IP traces. We're asking for sanctions, and we're asking for a gag order." Judge Reynolds leaned back, steepling his fingers. I've seen this play before. Rich folks think Facebook is a courtroom. It's not. He turned to the defense. If I see one more defamatory post from your clients, I'll hold them in contempt of court. Are we clear? Alan Dorsey opened his mouth, thought better of it, and nodded. Martha's face, the same face that had smiled at the gate months ago, was pale and tight. The Whitfields shut up on Facebook for a while. But the damage was done. Even with the gag order, whispers continued offline. The school never called me back. Friends stopped dropping by. One night my daughter texted, "Dad, someone at work said you're suing an HOA. They said you're crazy. What's going on?" I told her everything. The deed, the forgery, the fight. When she finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Grandpa would have fought too." It broke something in me, the kind of crack that lets light in. Allison's paralegal, Monica, found the missing puzzle piece in October. A string of emails between Greg Whitfield and the county commissioner, Charles Denton, obtained through a public records request. One email dated April 2021 read, "We can fast-track permits on the call parcel once the paperwork's adjusted. The family hasn't checked in years. Just make it clean." Paperwork's adjusted. That phrase was going to hang them. Allison's grin was the kind you see in movies, quiet, dangerous. "This is conspiracy," she said. "We've got the commissioner, the developer, and the HOA all in bed. We'll add Rico if we have to. They thought they were burying you. They just handed me the shovel." By November, Lakeview Estates was chaos. Contractors were suing for unpaid invoices, banks were demanding collateral, homeowners were realizing their mortgages were built on sand. And me? I was finally breathing again. Not free, not safe, but steady. One night, Allison called. "They'll make another move soon," she said. "When the money stops, they get desperate." "What do we do?" she said. "Nothing. They're cornered. Let them show their teeth." I looked out the window at the quiet Texas night. Crickets, a half moon, the faint shimmer of Lake Travis in the distance, the land my dad had loved more than anything. Martha thought she could bury me under lies. But the truth, steady, documented, notarized truth, was starting to rise like the dawn. And soon, everyone would see it. After 10 months of filings, subpoenas, and sleepless nights, it came down to one hearing. The marble halls of the Travis County Courthouse felt heavier than I remembered, the kind of silence that hums with judgment. When I walked in, the gallery was already packed. Rows of Lakeview Estates homeowners filled the benches, whispering like churchgoers at a scandalous sermon. Some looked angry, others terrified. They'd bought their dream homes thinking they were part of paradise. Now they were learning the ground beneath them might legally belong to a dead man's son. Martha Whitfield sat in the front row, white suit pristine, lipstick like war paint. She smiled when our eyes met, the same smile she'd worn the day she'd called me a trespasser. Behind her, Greg Whitfield whispered urgently to their attorney, Alan Dorsey, flipping through binders thick as phone books. I took my seat beside Allison Reyes, who was calm as always. She organized her papers with surgeon-like precision, one nail tapping the table in rhythm with my heartbeat. Judge Reynolds entered, robes sweeping, gavel in hand. The murmurs died. "Case number 24-178, the clerk announced. Cole versus Whitfield Development Group and Lakeview Estates HOA. Allison rose. "Good morning, Your Honor." Dorsey followed. "Good morning, Judge." Reynolds nodded. "Let's finish what we started." Allison's opening was surgical. "Your Honor, today we'll show that the defendants didn't make a mistake, they made a choice. They forged a dead man's signature, laundered the paperwork through a shell company, and built a subdivision on stolen soil. Dorsey objected. Inflammatory. But Reynolds waved it off. Counsel, you'll get your turn. Then came the exhibits. Allison clicked her laptop and the projector hummed to life. Exhibit A, she said, an internal email from Greg Whitfield to contractor Samuel Perez, dated June 2021. She began to read, voice even, deliberate. We'll backdate the deed. County's slow this year. Once the sale's recorded, Old Man Cole's kid can't touch it. The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Every whisper in the courtroom stopped cold. Judge Reynolds, and soon, everyone would see it. After 10 months of filings, subpoenas, and sleepless nights, it came down to one hearing. The marble halls of the Travis County Courthouse felt heavier than I remembered, the kind of silence that hums with judgment. When I walked in, the gallery was already packed. Rows of Lakeview Estates homeowners filled the benches, whispering like churchgoers at a scandalous sermon. Some looked angry, others terrified. They'd bought their dream homes thinking they were part of paradise. Now they were learning the ground beneath them might legally belong to a dead man's son. Martha Whitfield sat in the front row, white suit pristine, lipstick like war paint. She smiled when our eyes met, the same smile she'd worn the days she'd called me a trespasser. Behind her, Greg Whitfield whispered urgently to their attorney, Ellen Dorsey, flipping through binders thick as phone books. I took my seat beside Allison Reyes, who was calm as always. She organized her papers with surgeons-like precision, one nail tapping the table in rhythm with my heartbeat. Judge Reynolds entered, robes sweeping, gavel in hand. The murmurs died. Case number 24-0178, the clerk announced. Cole versus Whitfield Development Group and Lakeview Estates. Allison rose. Good morning, Your Honor. Dorsey followed. Good morning, Judge. Reynolds nodded. Let's finish what we started. Allison's opening was surgical. Your Honor, today we'll show that the defendants didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. They forged a dead man's signature, laundered the paperwork through a shell company, and built a subdivision on stolen soil. Dorsey objected. Inflammatory, but Reynolds waved it off. Counselor, you'll get your turn. Then came the exhibits. Allison clicked her laptop and the projector hummed to life. Exhibit A, she said. An internal email from Greg Whitfield to contractor Samuel Perez, dated June 21, 2021. She began to read, voice even, deliberate. We'll backdate the deed. County's slow this year. Once the sale's recorded, Old Man Cole's kid can't touch it. The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Every whisper in the courtroom stopped cold. Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Whitfield, is this your email? Greg swallowed. I don't recall. Allison didn't blink. Then perhaps your company's metadata will refresh your memory. It traces directly to your Houston office network, June 16, 2021, 8:43 p.m. The color drained from Greg's face. Even Martha's smile cracked. Judge Reynolds straightened. Counselor, I trust you're familiar with the penalties for perjury. Dorsey's man shot up. We will stipulate the email exists, Your Honor, but the context is forgery. Proceed. For the next hour, Allison dismantled their case piece by piece. She called the notary, Darlene Carter, to the stand. Ms. Carter trembled as she admitted under oath that she'd never personally met Richard Cole. Mr. Whitfield told me it was just delayed paperwork, she said, voice barely a whisper. He said the seller couldn't appear in person because of health reasons. The gallery gasped.
Next came a forensic handwriting expert who compared Dad's true signature, shaky, uneven from years of arthritis, to the pristine signature on the 2021 deed. The verdict? Different author, no doubt. By the time Allison finished, the Whitfields' defense looked like a house after a tornado. Judge Reynolds removed his glasses, rubbed his temples, and spoke slowly, like each word weighed a pound. This court finds clear evidence of fraudulent conveyance and forgery under Texas Penal Code 32.21 and 32.46. The injunction is upheld. Title is hereby restored to Mr. Ethan Cole. He turned toward the defense table. This matter will be referred to the Travis County District Attorney for criminal prosecution. Then a final slam of the gavel. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed like thunder over Lake Travis. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Allison shielded me with her briefcase and whispered, "Keep walking." Behind us, deputies approached Greg Whitfield. He didn't fight. He didn't even speak as they cuffed him. Forgery, wire fraud, real estate fraud, and conspiracy. Under Texas law, each count carried up to 20 years. Martha tried to follow him, but a deputy held out a hand. "Ma'am, you'll need to wait." Her face, once smug and controlled, twisted into disbelief. 2 months later, headlines told the rest. Whitfield developers collapse amid fraud scandal. Lakeview HOA dissolved after court ruling. The county seized the unsold homes to cover restitution and auctioned them to pay back defrauded buyers. The Whitfield's empire, a monument to greed, turned to dust. People kept asking if I'd sue for damages, take the land, sell it, cash out. But revenge didn't sit right. Dad's old words echoed in my head. Land's only worth something if it's shared. So, I founded the Cole Conservation Trust. We turned the 22 acres into a public reserve. Free lake access, hiking trails, a pier rebuilt from the old fence wood. The county partnered with us to clean up runoff from construction debris. Volunteers came every weekend, families who'd once been strangers. We put up a simple wooden sign by the entrance. Cole Conservation Trust, public welcome. It didn't look fancy. That was the point. A week after opening day, I found a folded note taped to the dock railing. Child's handwriting, purple marker. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. My dad says this lake was almost gone. I caught my first fish today. Emma R. Age 7." I kept that note. It sits framed above my desk now, next to Dad's photo. The sun was setting that evening, water glowing gold and crimson, wind whispering through the cedar trees. For the first time in years, I felt the land breathe again. Free, unowned, alive. Greg Whitfield took a plea deal. 12 years state prison, restitution of $1.2 million. Martha avoided prison but paid her own price. The HOA was gone, the mansion foreclosed, her name a curse in local politics. She moved to Houston, where, I'm told, she joined a new neighborhood improvement board. Old habits die hard. The corrupt commissioner Charles Denton resigned within weeks after emails showed his involvement. He now faces federal ethics charges. As for me,